Welcome to the eCommerce Badassery Podcast, the place for scrappy entrepreneurs who want to learn actionable steps and strategies to grow the traffic, sales, and profit in your e-commerce business. I'm your host, Jessica Totillo-Coster, a 20-year retail veteran and former brick-and-mortar boutique owner who spent 3 years as the only employee of a 7-figure online store. That shit was crazy. I know exactly how it feels to do all the things, and I'm sharing everything I learned the hard way so you don't have to. I may have started this business by accident, but supporting badass bosses like you lights me the fuck up, and I am so stoked to see you grow. Are you ready, babe? Let's roll. Welcome back to the eCommerce Badassery Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Totillo-Coster. I am so excited to have Kristin Fisher on the podcast. Corporate retail buyer turned e-commerce store owner, Kristin is the founder of the multi-six-figure gifting brand Bocu, a retail strategy coach for makers and independent retailers, and host of the Buyerside Chat Podcast. Kristin and I have very similar professional backgrounds. Like me, Kristin is on a mission to help product biz owners implement big retail strategies to scale their businesses profitably with ease. I had such a blast talking to Kristin. I honestly could have talked to her all day long, and we both felt like we had found our long-lost biz bestie. Whether you want to grow your business through wholesale or want to better manage your inventory, there's something for you to learn in this podcast. The only downside was that we did sort of have to cut our chat short for the sake of time because we were recording another episode for her show right after. In that episode, we talked about leaning into your local community for business growth, creating a kick-ass email strategy, and leveraging data to make business decisions. That episode of the Buyerside Chat Podcast will be going live next week, so make sure you check it out. All right, I won't make you wait any longer. Let's hop into the episode. Hey, Kristin, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited.
I think this happens with a lot of guests who are just in a similar space. It's like we know of each other. And when we finally reach out, it's like, oh, I've been waiting to reach out to you for a while. Oh, yeah, me too. And it just it takes a minute. So I'm glad that we're finally here.
I just love it. So it's a small community and I love it so much.
Absolutely. It makes it a whole lot more fun. We're the only ones out here teaching product-based business owners. It'd be really freaking lonely. Running your own business is lonely enough as it is. So it's nice to have other people in the space. And I'm really excited to talk to you because you have a similar background as me, that you've survived corporate and now you are out on your own and doing your own thing. And one of the things I always like to ask my guests is, why should we listen to anything you have to say today?
You kind of hit the nail on the head. I think having that corporate background, it's not necessary for sure. It's not necessary. You can scale your product business to the skies. You don't have to have that background. But I think the unique side is that I do have that background. I was a buyer for over 18 years in corporate retail. I've worked for brands like Urban Outfitters and Land's End and American Eagle. And so kind of spanning a different range of demographics. And I have really taken that experience and applied it to my business, which has nothing to do with apparel. And I've been scaling my own business, and I now support other product business owners to help them kind of take some of those corporate buyer secrets and just kind of pull the lid off and say they're not really secrets. Like, let's talk about it. This is how you can scale your business the way a buyer would. And also, hey, this is what buyers are looking for. Because a lot of the people that are probably listening to your podcast are makers and creatives and don't have that kind of financial buyer side. And they're just wondering, what is it going to take to get a buyer to buy their stuff and put it in their stores? And I can tell you kind of some of those secrets or their mindset and kind of the way that it works when it comes to them building out their collection. And so that is what I'm really passionate about, talking to people like yourself on their podcasts or to my clients to just talk about how you can scale your business and just think like a buyer, essentially.
I think that's so important. And it's similar in how people who have worked in retail get pigeonholed as if the only thing they will ever be good at is retail, when actually they are some of the most diverse people you could possibly hire because they literally do all the things. It's as close to a multitasking or multi-talented human you could ever find. They're just good at a lot of shit. But also, like with the corporate piece of it, I have my own opinions about the corporate machine. But at the end of the day, there is so much to learn from their structure and the way they do things. And if you can take even just a tiny piece of that into your small business, you don't have to be them, but there is so much power in that structure and those quote unquote secrets. So
I don't want to be that either. I left that for a reason. But the things that I learned there and took and applied to my own business, I had about 3.5 years of overlap while I was a buyer and I was also building my business. And without even realizing it, I was doing the things. It's just what I had learned to do. But buying an inventory and product and building an assortment and working with brands, all those things kind of ended up coming naturally to me because I had years and years and years of experience doing that. And I've been profitable since year one with my business. I think because of that, that truly applies to it. And no, I don't want to be a corporate brand either, but there is something about the fact that every single corporate retail company out there, whether they have completely different demographics or business models, they all kind of do the same thing. There is a formula to it, and there's a reason for that. And so as you think about scaling your business from a hobby to a business to whatever you define your level of success, there are certain things that you want to take along with you for the ride because they're going to help you reach those next levels.
absolutely. I think it's so important. And it's really how I support my students and my listeners. What I'm teaching is everything that I learned on the job for 20 plus years and all the stuff I learned in school. I'm in a little bit of a different camp where I actually went to school for fashion merchandising. So I do actually use the things that I learned in my degree.
Same.
I mean, we spent an entire semester just learning Excel, and that was just level one. If you were going to be in fashion buying, you need to know how to use Excel. So it was very focused in that way. But as you said, there is a formula to it. And when I had my brick and mortar store, working in the industry for so many years and understanding how to manage an assortment and manage my inventory and my cash. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't overbuy in some categories and that I didn't get emotionally attached to my inventory and screwed that up a little bit. But ultimately, I did 650 grand in my first year. And that was even after like paying an entire year's rent up front so that I could get the space because I was bidding against somebody for it, paying myself, paying my team. So I just took all of those concepts and applied them to the business and it worked. So it can sometimes be as simple as that. For today, I really love to just kind of pick your brain a little bit about both sides of it because you talk to a lot of people about if you want to go into wholesale, this is what buyers are looking for and here's how you can appeal to them. But also have been the buyer and are running your own product-based business. So I'd really love to look at it from both sides and just tell us all the things. So why don't we start on I know you work a lot with Fair and you talk about them a lot. So for that product maker, product-based business owner who wants to get into wholesale, what are some of the first things you tell them to do to make sure they can stand out?
Hands down, I think the first thing is getting super clear on who you are targeting, who you're attracting. And that goes all the way back to just who your customer is. Take wholesale out of it. Who is your ideal customer? Because at the end of the day, your ideal buyers have the same ideal customer as you. When you get that clarity and you're like, okay, these are the people I'm targeting, that makes it a little bit easier for you to understand who the ideal buyer would be for you. So that's just foundational understanding your ideal target customer and buyer. That's for sure, have that nailed down because otherwise you're going to be speaking into a sea of everyone, trying to appeal to everyone, and you don't want to do that. That usually does not work. The only times that really works are for like Target and Amazon because they sell everything you could think of, and guaranteed everybody listening to this is not trying to be that. Or maybe there is somebody. That's really the first thing. The second thing is your collection and looking at it from the lens of a buyer. So not just, oh, this is really beautiful product, but is it balanced? And when I say balanced, I mean, do you have a range of price points? Do you have a range of pattern and color or silhouettes, depending on what you design or make? If it's candles or body care, is it a range of fragrances or sizes? You can slice and dice your assortment in so many different ways. But the reason that it's important from my perspective, I'm curious what you think about this too, but from my perspective, I think it's important to have a balanced assortment that has that range of price points and that range of product so that when a buyer comes in, whether they're on Fair or whether they're buying from you direct, it really doesn't matter. When they're coming to you and they're saying, your minimum order is this, I have to probably buy 5 SKUs from this brand. I don't want to buy 5 of the same thing or 5 different versions of the same thing. I don't want to buy 5 things that are the same price point because they're trying to increase their average order value. They're trying to give their customers a balanced view to your brand. So you want to make sure that your collection is structured in a way that not only are they able to hit your minimum order value, but also that they can build a collection that fully represents your brand. And I think that's something that gets missed a lot of times where you really fall in love with a fragrance. And so I'm just going to use a candle brand as an example. You fall in love with the fragrance and you put it in 3 different vessels and 2 different sizes. You don't have much variety in your collection. And a buyer is going to come in and buy one of those because they don't know how that smells or they don't know how their customer is going to respond to that. So thinking about not only the collection itself, but also those price points will help your buyer to come in and more easily build out an assortment from you or collection, but also increase your average order value because you're able to push those retails a little more by giving a range of price points. I think those are truly like 2 of the biggest things from a starting point, getting clear on targeting and then having a really balanced assortment.
It is really important. And I will always talk about my experience having a brick and mortar boutique, especially when you're talking about the non-apparel things. That was the thing that I sold mostly. I was really smart and I opened a clothing boutique after the 2008 housing crash when everyone was broke. I was really smart. I mean, it worked out, but I wouldn't go and do that now because I don't have those same advantages as I had then of being part of the community and everything. But back then, it was premium denim and going out tops. And that's literally what everyone bought. And that was the bulk of my business. And so when I wanted to create that experience, and anyone who has been in an Urban Outfitters knows what this is like. You go in, especially around the holidays, and they have the big table with all the gifty items, and it just creates this immediate vibe when you walk in there. And that's essentially what I was trying to create in the store. But I only have so much space to do that. So I have to be so discerning about the other items that I am bringing into the store. Is it going to fit? How am I going to display it? Using candles as the example, like they're bulky. They take up a lot of shelf space and I need that shelf space to make me money. And if I am not sure that I can make money on it, then I'm probably just going to skip your product. It needs to be almost a sure thing, especially when you're buying as a small business. The Bloomingdales of the world get to go back and say, hey, this didn't sell. I need markdown money. Easy. It doesn't matter for them. You don't get to do that as a small business because you are a small fish in a very big pond when you're working with bigger brands. So they have to be so discerning about this stuff. And I had a few, I'm forgetting like the brand names now, but it was this little plastic thing that would essentially create a racer back out of your bra. What year was this? 2009. Totally had that. I probably still have it in my drawer because I'm like keeping it because it'll probably come back. 100%. Because also like the little rib tank tops were such a thing, but it was like you don't want to have to go out and buy a racer back bra. So you just get this thing. Even bringing that in, it's like, all right, well, cool. They gave me a display for it, but now I have to display that somewhere. And now it's taking up space on my cash wrap. And like, how many different things can I put on my cash wrap? Because I also had commando underwear and double-sided tape, all of that girly stuff that we need for all of the skimpy things that we wear. And so it's all like very intentional decisions that these buyers have to make. And we really have to put them at the forefront of our decisions. There's someone who works in PR, Nora Wolf. She's been on the podcast. She really talks about when you're pitching for PR, that you have to do it with empathy. You have to really think about that person who's got like 150 pitches in their mailbox every single day.
This is exactly what I say to brands about how they are reaching out to store owners and buyers. Your product has to solve a need for them. take the time to really do that research and look at what else they're selling and make sure, first of all, it makes sense. So you're not wasting your time or their time. But that empathetic view to it is, hey, I know you have limited shelf space. I know your open to buy is so tight. You don't have money for this, but here's why you should buy it. But how can you say that? And how can you make your product be the answer to their prayers? Because every buyer wants their next bestseller, because a clothing boutique has to have other things in it. It can't just be clothes. Like a customer might come in and not necessarily need a thing from apparel perspective, but they might pick up a little thing and that adds to your sales. So you do need that balance in there. And so it's like, you're very, very intentional about what you're spending that money on.
Absolutely. And especially as a smaller boutique, I am going and I am getting the denim brands that I know are going to draw people into my store. They are going to come to me because I'm the one that has Hudson jeans in my little zip code. That's what gets them in the door because they already want that thing. But my margin on that is not great. I'm getting like 50% margin on it because you have MSRP and there's only so much I could do. But when I have all these other little things to help build up my AOV, like that's what makes me profitable. I was talking to Sierra Stockland.
She's been on the podcast a couple of times.
Love her. And we owned stores at the same time during the scarf craze. We were talking about thousands of scarves that we probably sold and they had really great margins and that was wonderful. But that was like a more important piece of the business than even the jeans. The jeans brought them in, but the scarves actually made us money. So
you want to hear something funny? I love this because I worked for Urban around that time. And so I was the accessories buyer, but also the accessories designer. We did not have a design team for soft accessories. So I was going to the shows. I was working with vendors on developing the product and scarves were it. Scarves and hats. I mean, made millions and millions and millions on those things. And so funny because Urban did a marketing campaign. It was called like the no pants trend. And it was like the long shirt with the skinny scarf or the eternity scarf and the fedora, that whole look. And the pants business tanked. And the pants business, that paid the bills. The scarves department didn't pay the bills. But it was like scarves were so hot that brands were taking a stance that you didn't even need to buy pants. And they were like, well, shit. Now we're not selling any pants and we're down in sales. So let's fix this. That was a marketing issue, but it all ties together with the fact that you have to bring the hot thing in that's probably going to sell, but you also still have to have the bread and butter on your floor.
Absolutely. And these are the things that boutique owners, store owners are grappling with all the time. Now, online, in theory, if you're just an online store, it's a little bit easier because you're not necessarily maxing out your floor space, but you could be maxing out your warehouse. You still have to manage that inventory. There is such thing as too many products on a website.
And also, that's where it actually gets really slippery. And where I often see a lot of the bigger issues happening is brick and mortar store owners have physical space. They cannot overspend because they don't have the room for it. Where the issues happen there is maybe not allocating your dollars correctly and buying too much in one category and you're not balanced. There's other things that can happen there. But on the e-com side, if you do have the space, it can be a free-for-all. And then suddenly you have a million choices and it's like, oh my God, your website is like you're scrolling for days. We've all been on those sites and it's like gets out of control real quick.
They just have too much money invested in inventory that they could be using in marketing or hiring or so many other things. So we do want to talk about the inventory management piece of it. But before we do that, for the people who want to do the wholesale thing, it's so crazy now. Like I think about, I'm from New York, so I was living in Westchester County. It was a quick train ride to the city to go to the shows and the showrooms and all of that. It was literally my excuse for buying my Louis Vuitton Never Full bag. And I was like, well, I need this big bag to collect all the catalogs when I go on a buying trip, even though it almost broke my shoulder, but I didn't care. To this day, I still have that bag, love that bag. I've had the handles fixed on it, but it's worth more now than it was when I paid for it. So it truly was an investment. Anyway, people don't do that. They go on fair. It's like so bizarre. And I'm like, man, my life would have been easier, but maybe not as fun. if it didn't so much of that show and showroom culture. So now you're just competing on a website. How do you even get seen there?
Faire has totally revolutionized the way buyers buy, particularly that mid and smaller tier level buyer. And it's opened up the doors of opportunity for so many businesses to be able to find more brands that they wouldn't have access to have cash flow. Before it was, you did not have any cash flow. You did not get terms unless you were consistently buying from a buyer or a brand. So it's really given a lot of opportunities for small business owners. And on the flip side, for brands, it gives them a form to sell. But with that said, it's saturated. And so that is where things come in, like your photography and your packaging. And those things are extremely important. And it's probably not the first time you've said this. Someone else has said this on the podcast, but it is so critical. It's very easy to see when you're scrolling and looking for something. You can type in a couple of words, whatever the product is you're searching for, and thousands of brands will come up or products will come up. And you can easily see who's new, or you think they're new, or maybe has what we used to think of for Etsy, that like handmade feeling. I know Etsy has evolved so much, but kind of that like older 2009, 2010 Etsy, where it just feels like you're just playing around and making labels and learning, which is totally fine. But I think when you're taking that step into Faire, the days are gone where you can take what you sell starting out and you're on Etsy or going to markets and think that that's going to work on Faire, because it's really not, unless you're targeting a very specific type of shop that wants that. Most shops are looking for a polished brand. So it's important, even if you're in your early days, to kind of put the best foot forward, do your testing and learning and figure out like who you're speaking to, what your product is, what your brand is, what your best sellers are, and then invest in getting really solid packaging and branding so that whenever your ideal buyer does find you, you're ready for them. Even if you're not really ready, you look like you're ready. But when it comes to Faire, like you said, it's a website, and Faire functions on the back end with an algorithm just like Google. Just like Etsy. It is all keyword driven. So SEO is extremely important. How you name your products, your word count, how you're using keywords, how you're updating them seasonally, leveraging your filters. All those things that are important to your D2C site on Google are just as important on Faire through the lens of a buyer. So the buyer is shopping from you the way a customer would be doing a Google search looking to purchase something. But they're looking for ROI on that investment versus a general customer is just looking for self-gratification or a gift or something, but a buyer wants to make money on that. So when you put that empathetic thought in your brain on what a buyer is going through, what a buyer is looking for, and how your product solves that problem, or what purpose that serves, or how you're different than the 15,000 other cancel brands, put that on there and really take that stand and be very clear. That is how you'll get in that algorithm and start to be served up organically versus waiting for someone to come find you.
So important. And I'm obviously in the game, but like I'm not in the game that I was back then. And I'm curious. So right now you see a lot of brands popping up and consumers really talking about how important things like sustainability and all of that are to them. My experience, and it's limited in this case to my boutique, is when I brought in things that were maybe more expensive because it was organic cotton or it was this or it was that, my customer didn't care. They didn't want to spend the extra money on it. And these are people who are dropping $200 on a pair of jeans, but like, oh, this shirt is $60, but it's not Michael Starr's. And so I don't really care that it's this other special thing. So from like a buyer perspective, are they taking that into consideration? Does it not really matter because their end consumer probably doesn't care? Does it maybe depend on the retailer?
I think it, first of all, 100% depends, because you'll know your customer so intimately and what matters to them. And some customers are super price sensitive. And so you can't do that premium product. You can't go the organic cotton route because that's not important to them. What is important to them is fashion and price, because they just need it going out top. I do think what has really changed, particularly in the last 5 years, I think from the last election, couple of years, all of that, values have become extremely important to the consumer, which therefore is important to buyers. And so what is important to your ideal customer funnels through to what the buyers are looking for. So I think there has been definitely a shift with buyers looking for products that are sustainable, organic, all natural. I think with apparel, the fast fashion and environmental impact and sustainability impact was a trend at first that has now continued and become more of a mainstay, important piece of consumer behaviors. And so while I think there is still a large percent of the country and consumer base that are price sensitive, especially with inflation, that is important to them, that they're not spending all their money on the fashion going out top. Certain things are more important to people, like their health and their impact on the environment. So it's kind of a loaded question because it really depends on who you're targeting. But I do think it's more important across the board with pricing that underlying. Do I buy groceries and gas this week, or do I get that really cute top? What's it going to be?
Yeah. And that's kind of the struggle too with made in America stuff. People say they want it, but they don't want to pay what it would cost to buy it. And so I'm always the person that sees the gray in everything, which is so hard sometimes, but that is just the nature of it. So typically what I will tell people is, unless that is your entire brand, like I have a particular student in mind, that is her brand. Literally everything she sells, it's all about sustainable, non-toxic cleaning supplies and things like that. That is her brand. She leads with that. For everyone else, I'm like, that's a nice to have. It's going to make them feel good that they bought from you, but it's not going to be the thing that gets them to make a buying decision. So I guess if you're thinking about what your listings look like on Faire, it's probably a similar thing. If that is your whole brand, lean into it. Otherwise, it's just kind of a nice to have.
100%. If that is your whole brand, that should be in some way shown at that top of your Faire page. So your header image, just like your own website, it's like a one landing page. In 10 seconds, does someone land on your page and know what you're about? So you want to look at it objectively from that perspective. So if you're all about that, that needs to be at the forefront. If you're not all about that, what are you all about? And make sure that that's on there. But oh, hey, if you also are really intentional about how you're sourcing your materials, or you give back, or whatever good you're doing, make sure you're talking about that, maybe buried a little bit deeper. You can leverage the filters that are on Faire, because brands or buyers, do filter if those are important to them, and you want to make sure you're showing up. Like a really easy one that is missed so often, which surprises me, is the women-owned filter. So if you're a women-owned brand, use that filter, because so many people are extremely hyper-focused on a value that is important to them. Any criteria you meet, make sure your filters are all showing on that, so that maybe it's not at the forefront of your messaging, but you're still going to show up in the search if you are relevant to that.
So, my God, I'm forgetting their names right now, but are you familiar with the app Goodbye?
No. What is this app?
So this app is really geared toward the end consumer, to have a place to go to find these vetted brands that match their values. And so you can filter veteran-owned, women-owned, LGBT, etc. And their monetization model is commission. So if somebody searches through Goodbye, clicks through, and then goes and buys something from your site, then you pay them a commission for that sale. 99% is based around those values. And so if Faire has something similar, be using it, because it is so important to people now. Absolutely. Any other big mistakes or things you see people make with Faire specifically? One of the things that I see is people will put a listing up on Faire, and then they're just like, wholesale's not working for me. And I'm like, well, you got to be a little bit more active. Then it's not like if you build it, they will come. But aside from that, is there anything else, or maybe just ways that they're not quite taking advantage of the platform as well as they could?
I mean, I think the main thing is just getting it up there and then being like, oh, thank God it's done. It's there. And then not really touching it again. To elaborate really on what you said, there's a lot of opportunity in seasonality and buying seasons that brands can take advantage of that I don't see them doing enough. And that really goes back to SEO and keywords. So if you are 3 months out from Mother's Day and you have product that could be right for Mother's Day gifting, get that up on your fair in early February so that you are getting in that algorithm and those keywords are searching. So you want to always have those evergreen keywords that are in there that will help your business be found or your product be found by buyers. But also just thinking about what are the key touch points that I'm going to intentionally update so that my imagery looks seasonally appropriate, my copy looks seasonally appropriate. And that shows a buyer that you're like on it. And it's not just holiday season. Think outside the box. It's not just holiday. That's usually when people will update their images and put their holiday collection on, but it goes beyond that. And I think when you're really intentional about it, the other thing is just really leveraging the email opportunity within the fair platform. So obviously you want to be building your own list outside. You want to be building a segment in Klaviyo that speaks to your wholesale accounts and your wholesale buyers. But within the fair platform, you can email directly, you can message directly, you can also send campaigns. And not all your campaigns are going to land in your buyer's inbox because Fair has some restrictions on how many emails retailers can get from brands each day, which is nice on the retailer side. Frustrating on the brand side, I get that, but it's nice for me because I get so many emails in my inbox from brands reaching out, but you can use that audience of people that have already been interested in buying from you or have bought from you and just keep nurturing them, or you can send direct messages. And so if you have new collection and you have like a list of key boutiques or shops that you know buy from you regularly or haven't bought from you in a while, get in there and start connecting with them. So I think that there's a connection opportunity within that platform that kind of gets underutilized. That is like a direct way to talk to people that will give them a notification you message them and you won't necessarily be buried in their inbox. So I think leveraging the platform and then also the seasonality component would be the two things that I think are underutilized.
Especially the connection piece. I can see why someone would hear like, oh, they're limiting my email, so I'm just not going to send them. But remember, Fair is a platform. And their job is to create a really great experience for their buyers so that the buyers will keep coming and buying from their wholesalers. So it's in their best interest to limit that communication. Otherwise, those people are just going to unsubscribe. It's the same thing that all the social media platforms do. They manage their algorithm because they're trying to give the user base a good experience so that they'll stay. So that doesn't mean that you just like stop using it.
Does land in some people's inbox and you know. So the best thing to do is think about like how you can have a weekly campaign that you don't have to really think too hard about. There's a brand, Spaghetti and Meatballs, that is, first of all, she's fantastic. She's a greeting card and stationery designer, like the best product, and she's hilarious. She's a great social media follow if you don't follow her. She is really fabulous on Fair. She has a 5% off promo that she runs. It's like Greeting Card Tuesday or something. And so I don't get it every single week, but I do occasionally get it. And it's probably not a crazy amount of effort for her because it's just something she continuously runs and she's kind of known for. So like, just think about how you can automate it or make it a little bit easier so that you're not like, I'm sending another email on the platform that maybe not all the buyers are going to see. And like, I don't have time for this. Like, think about if that one email gets to that one person that you have been trying to get to buy from you, and then it hits, and then you get a massive order on Fair. Like, you just never know. So it's that consistency and showing up and just kind of being at the forefront so that when they do have money and they're open to buy to spend, you're at the front of their thoughts.
That's the same thing that I recommend you do with your D2C people. You just got to, like, one thing you cannot fix for people is timing. Either they can buy from you right now or they can't. It just is what it is. Like, the only time I ever made a concession in my open to buy and my assortment was when Michael Jackson died. It was like, oh shit, I need some Michael Jackson t-shirts. So like, it didn't matter. I was buying them. But most of the time it's like, I don't really need that right now. I'll come back and get it later. You can't fix that. So you do just have to stay top of mind and keep showing up. So I love that mindset shift. Really, Selling wholesale is just the same. It's just a different customer.
This is the thing I always say. Do not overthink this. Do not overthink it because it is not two different strategies. It is one strategy that is multi-layered. So your marketing strategy is one strategy. And then you have your D2C side and your wholesale side. And you just need to think about how are they overlapping? You're talking about things to your wholesale buyers a little earlier than your customers, but like your overarching strategy isn't different. It's the same person. I think if you really sit with the fact that your customer is also your ideal buyer's customer, it makes it a little easier because the way you're creating content or your brand voice that you're using in emails and just like that thought process kind of crosses over. So it's not a completely different thing. It's not a completely different person buying from you. And chances are the buyer that you're targeting probably also wants to buy your stuff for themselves, or probably also the ideal buyer or customer.
Especially if it's a small boutique owner, right? Like 90% of the time, I'm just buying the things that I love because that's what was cool at the time. And I still wear scarves. So there's that.
I have a stack of scarves and I'm like, these are going to come back. I just know it. And the skinny scarf is back in. So I'm just saying.
I mean, I've worn it anyway, but when the skull scarf was a thing, I have my McQueen scarf. I do have one. I need to be able to just like wear that all the time. But I'm like,
you do you.
Yeah, I have skulls everywhere. I just love them. That's a skull candle. You can't tell really because it's black, but it is. So as we're coming up onto our time here, I just wanted to touch a little bit on managing inventory in your own business. And I have definitely talked about this on the podcast and speaking from my own experience. So I learned how to buy in corporate, but I never bought in corporate. I only bought in my boutique. And like you were saying earlier, I wasn't getting any terms. Like I had to put everything on a credit card and it sucked. But hey, I earned a lot of points. So I guess it kind of balanced out.
That vacation.
And so what are some of like the biggest mistakes and things that you see small businesses making when it comes to their own inventory management?
Well, I think the biggest thing is having emotion tied into it and feeling personally tied to it. So you can, of course, buy the things that you like. That's how we all start. Usually people are creating based on what they love, and then people end up loving it and they start making it and buying the things. And if it's a boutique owner, they do it because they love fashion or they love gift shops and that's just like their dream. And so you start out by just buying all the things you like and feeling emotionally tied to it. And when you turn the corner from, I just started my business, I don't have any data, I'm just rolling with it and seeing what people like, into, okay, I got to make some money, I need to be profitable, the emotion has to kind of be left out the window. And that doesn't mean that you can't really fall in love with something. But if your customer doesn't love something, you have to just be okay with letting it go. So it's really having that power of the edit. And I actually talked about this on Sierra's podcast, but just like sitting in power with your ability to edit your product because it ties back to your bottom line. There's a direct line between how much inventory, how many SKUs you have, and your profit margin at the end of the day. Would you rather pay yourself? Would you rather go on that vacation? Or would you rather have like 15 versions of the same shirt because you just couldn't pick? So pulling the emotion out of it is, I think, hands down the biggest one. And if you're a maker or a brand owner yourself, that even is more important because you are the creator of the thing. And so it's okay to create all the things, design it till your heart is content, draw it, create it, make it, but what you're actually producing and what you're actually putting on your website or on your line sheet, it's a different thing. So you want to be taking that lens of what's actually going to sell, not just, I love this, I want it all to come to life. Because maybe something can come to life in a future collection. So there's that piece. The other thing is not having an open to buy, not having a budget. So you need to have your top line sales revenue and your profit goals planned out. And then from there, you need to really understand how many choices, how many SKUs of product you need to hit that sales dollar. And then from there, what's your ideal sell through? And how many of these are you going to realistically sell through to be able to hit that sales goal and not have a ton at markdown at the end of the day? And that's the complex thing that is really hard to figure out when you don't have any buying experience. But when you're not thinking about your sales tied back to how much inventory you need to hit those sales, that's when it gets really messy and you just end up with way too much depth of either too many things or too few things with too much inventory behind them.
It's a hard balance and it takes practice. And even the people who have been doing this forever get it wrong sometimes.
It's like, yeah, I know best practices, but also I'm a human and I love product. That's why I do this. So yeah, I make mistakes too. And then I just fix them.
It's going to hurt your pride a little bit. It might hurt your wallet a little bit, but you can always fix it. I mean, do you remember Delia's?
Yes.
So I used to work in their retail stores. I worked there for years. And do you know how many graphic tees I have folded in my lifetime? But it was pile them high and watch them fly. And that worked then. And that does not work now. But these are things that you learn along the way. The worst thing you could do is just not try and completely fly blind. And I think it was Ciara who said, because she works with a lot of people who are in debt and overspending on inventory. And she's like, just because you don't look doesn't mean that debt isn't there. There were younger years in my personal finances when I was like, I'm just not really going to pay attention to that. Well, you're still just as broke, even if you don't look. So you need to look and be proactive. So I think it's really important. And one of the things that I really focus on to get people started with this is just look at your inventory at the category level. What percentage of sales is coming from your denim? And then what percentage of sales is coming from your tees? Just start there. And that's how you need to spend. That needs to be proportional. That's the thing I screwed up. And it's funny because I knew I was screwing it up when I was doing it, but I was still doing it. It's very strange, the human mind, what it does. In the end, it all worked out fine. But that's the easiest place to start there. And you got to be okay just sucking at it at first and like feeling a little bit overwhelmed and being like, oh, this is too many numbers. Like I talk so much to people about data. And like, I know the first time you go into Google Analytics, you're like, whoa, what is all this? But take a little time, you start to learn it. It all starts to make sense. And then it just becomes really empowering when you have that kind of control.
And the thing too is don't start with all the numbers. Don't go into Google Analytics and look at every report and every number, just like with your sales. The category example is 100% the right kind of next step. Just look at the categories. Just kind of slowly start looking at the metrics. You don't need to be tracking every minute point of data all the time. Just start looking at one. Look at your sales to inventory ratio. You'll start to quickly see where you have too much inventory that you got to move through. And then when it comes time to go to a trade show or it comes time to design into your next collection, you need to have a choice count that matches up with the sales count. And then your inventory needs to tie back. It all goes back to the beginning of our conversation with the balance and just looking at that relationship of sales to inventory and choices and balancing it out. And like I said, taking the emotion out of it. And then you're like, I'm just going to do what I can with the information that I have and then learn and then tweak and then learn and then tweak because literally nobody has it figured out. Major retailers don't have it figured out. Like you can have all the data in the world. You can have 1,000 people working for you. You still won't get it right. The fun of owning our own business is the figuring it out phase. The messy middle is actually the most fun part because you can control what you do next. You can say like, I don't want to do this category anymore. It's not productive. It's not making enough money for me. So I'm going to try this whole other thing. And if that works, great. And if it doesn't, as long as you're still in business, you'll learn something.
I mean, problem solving is one of my favorite things to do ever. Maybe I'm unique in that. But I said earlier, the big retailers, they buy something that doesn't sell and then they go back to the brand and they say, hey, I need some markdown money. Because guess what? They picked a bad product because they didn't know either. There's a reason why you go into a department store and there are so many things on sale is because they didn't figure it out. So we're all just figuring it out. One random, like super technical question. Now, when you are selling something evergreen, this is so not nearly as important, but for like the boutique owners out there in the world, how do you just build in to your open to buy an expectation of what you're going to have to mark down? Like, is there a percentage that they should be just considering from the jump?
I mean, I think you always want to just assume your sell-through. And so you want to assume that you're always going to have on hand a new collection. Let's say it's an 80% sell-through, which would mean you'd have 20% to mark down at the end. You could go higher than that, but in a physical retail space, it's pretty unrealistic to expect much higher than an 80% sell-through, because that means you nailed your size runs and you nailed everything like pretty close. So like, I wouldn't say much higher than that. If you're e-commerce and you're not apparel, or if you are a boutique owner and it's not apparel, you could probably push yourself to be a little higher if you want to be conservative and be like a 90% sell-through. But you want to always assume you're going to have markdowns. Like, we don't have crystal balls. So whether you have a bestseller or a total dud, you're probably going to have some left over at the end. The things where you're going to have 100% sell-through are the things that you were like, this is a little fashion moment. This is just a little special thing I'm going to buy really tight and I want to sell out of it. And that's what creates demand. You'll start to train your customers to know that you're going to have some special things that aren't always there. So having that higher sell-through. When it comes to like an evergreen product, you'd have a lower sell-through because you don't want to be selling out of that. You always want stock in your ideal size range or in the breadth of that. If it's like a mini collection that you always have. So you would have a lower sell-through planned for that so that you're always in stock. And then you just manage that kind of as its own line item and you just kind of track that. And then whatever you need to keep that in stock at whatever the ideal sell-through is, let's say it's a 70% sell-through at the end of your cycle or your buying period that you're looking at. So you have 30% or even 40% left over. So you still have full stock. Whatever you have left of that, that is what you have left to buy for everything else. Because you want to protect those key pieces. You didn't really ask for like a full tangent, but I gave it to you anyway.
I love it. I think this is something that people aren't generally talking about on the internet and teaching people. And I think that gets people into trouble with buying too, because they're not planning for the fact that they're going to have to mark this down and they're not going to make the full retail value of all of the inventory you have. There is a percentage that is just not going to sell, especially in apparel. Like, if you have to buy pre-packs, you know you're not selling the smallest and the biggest sizes most of the time. That's what I always had left over, but I get a good margin on it. So it kind of all balances out in the end. You have to kind of plan for those things as well. And I feel like you and I could go on all of the tangents and talk about this literally all day long.
I know. We're going to like just take this on to the Buyerside Chat Podcast and we're just going to keep talking about it. And it's pretty much what's going to have to happen, I think.
We're doing a podcast swap. And so we're just going to record them back to back. So we're going to hop from one to the other. But I do think that overall, doesn't matter who your customer is, what your product is, where you're selling, whether it's direct to consumer, whether it's in person or online. There are just these basic foundations of a retail business that span all of that. And I think we get so caught up in all of the shiny objects and the social media and the TikTok shop and the this and the that. And yep, it's like, okay, let's just take a pause. Just come back to basics. Like, do we have all of these things in place? Do we have our inventory managed? And I think as long as you get those foundations in place, it doesn't matter where you go, what platform you're on, what you choose, you will be successful. You just need all those foundational things in place.
It's like if you go to a furniture store and pick out all the furniture for your house, but you didn't build a house. Where are you going to put all this shit? Talking about inventory and buying, like, it is so not sexy. So it's a thing for me when I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I talk to people about this? Because it's not the hottest Instagram trend or the hottest thing happening on TikTok or whatever it may be, but it is so important. And I'm so passionate about it because it's how you can be more profitable. So then whenever you do decide, oh, hey, I might try out TikTok shop and then you go viral, it's like, oh, okay, now I have this sudden influx of customers and like, do they have anything else to buy from me that makes sense? Or was it just that one item? Does it all crumble down when you go viral? Or is it like foundation there? So it's just, I'm super passionate about it because it's how you make money and we're all here to do that.
I try and tell people all the time, like sometimes even if it's not sexy or it's not the new, fun, exciting thing, like this is a business. You have to make money. Do the things, even if you don't want to do them, to make the money so that you have more freedom to go do the other things you want to do. And normally I ask all of my guests at the end, if we lost our audience along the way, what is the one thing you want them to take away? Not to put words in your mouth, but I feel like it is get a handle on your inventory and get your business foundations in place. I feel like we answered it already.
I think we did. I mean, get that foundation in place. Don't be embarrassed or afraid if you don't know the answer, because we didn't come out of the womb knowing the answer to this. You have to learn it. So don't be embarrassed by that. Just find a safe space where you can talk to somebody about it, learn the things, and just start doing the work and right sizing your inventory. And you'll just feel so much better. Like you said, data is power. And it's really empowering whenever you know your numbers and you know, I'm making these creative decisions based on what I know to be true because the facts don't lie. Get it in order and don't be afraid.
I love that so much. Well, thank you so much for being here, Kristin, and finally being the one to reach out. Please tell everyone where they can find you, both your product-based business and the coaching that you do. Tell us all of the things.
Thank you. It's just been so much fun. I feel like we are long lost best friends and we could talk for forever. So thank you for having me. So you can find me a couple places. So my product business is a gift box brand called Bocu. So you can find me at Shop Bocu, BOCU. So we sell curated gift boxes and we do a lot of custom gifting for businesses. And then I also have my own podcast, the Buyerside Chat. And you could find me on Instagram at Kristin Fisher Coaching. And that's also my website.
Got it. What kind of work do you do with other product-based businesses?
It's so funny because I started out and I was like, I'm going to help boutique owners. I'm going to help them figure out how to buy. And what has actually happened is I work with 98% so far, as of now, brands and helping them basically figure out what buyers are looking for, how to right size their inventory and build out their collection and really scale their businesses. So it's more on that wholesale side and growing profitably. The Product Scaling Intensive is a group coaching program. I have a couple other things I'm launching. I have some resources I'd love to give you guys. I'll drop a link for you that you can put in the show notes. That is a private podcast series all about really scaling your Fair platform and just some thought-provoking questions about what buyers are really looking for on Fair and how they think. So that's really a lot of what I do. It's helping brands kind of tap into that next level and think like a buyer.
I love that so much. Thank you again, Kristin. Thank you, audience, for being here. I will put all of those links in the show notes. I really appreciate the fact that you could literally be anywhere on the internet. And I just love that you're here and you're learning, especially because these guest episodes are way longer than my solo episodes. So if you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Hope you're having a kick-ass day, and I'll see you on the flip side, friend. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you want to learn more about growing your e-commerce business, get started with my free resource library at ecommercebadassery.com/free stuff and get an invite to the lounge, my e-commerce marketing membership. When you're ready for one-on-one support, apply to work with me at ecommercebadassery.com/apply. Before you go, would you do me a quick favor? Leave a rating and review and tap that follow button. This pushes me up the chart so I can support more scrappy e-commerce entrepreneurs just like you. I'm on a mission to reach as many as I can, and I could really use your help. Thanks so much in advance. Until next time, e-commerce friend, stay badass.